And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're glad you've chosen to watch our show today, and we're here every week, whether you are or not. We're meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues.
But if you're not, why aren't you? Well, we're really glad you are, because we're bringing a friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine, for you to meet today. That you may not have met him before. His name is Bob Alexander. He has a truly wonderful story about success in the practice of law, and he's a products liability lawyer. But what I need to tell you very quickly after having said that is he represents the companies. He represents the big companies. And he's got his own small boutique firm here in Oklahoma City. And he's going to tell you about it and tell you about his history and a lot of his background. It's fascinating.
And we'll get to it coming up on The Verdict.
The idea of sending American money out of our own economy these days for foreign oil is madness. Yet we're spending $25 billion a month on foreign oil. America's 100-year supply of natural gas can break this pattern and strengthen our economy. See how it can create jobs, generate clean electricity, fuel our cars, and protect our environment at chk.com. Chesapeake, America's champion of natural gas.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
There's no waiting at the St. Anthony ER.
No waiting.
Announcing the end of ER waiting at St. Anthony Hospital. Go to saintsok.com and reserve your time online.
Why didn't we think of that?
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Oh, it's a pleasure today to introduce a longtime friend of mine, Bob Alexander, Robert H. Alexander, Jr. He's an attorney here in Oklahoma City. He grew up in Oklahoma City, graduated from Douglas High School, did his undergraduate work at Howard University, where he was designated Phi Beta Kappa, graduated from Harvard Law School. He was the founder of the law office of Robert H. Alexander, Jr. He started that in 1988. Prior to that time, I'm pleased to say I got to practice law with him for a couple of years and enjoyed that thoroughly. He has been named the outstanding practitioner in Oklahoma of products liability defense work. He is a son of Robert H. Alexander, Sr., a longtime minister in Oklahoma City, and Ruby Alexander. And to Ruby, I say hello. And your son is just doing fine here. We're really glad to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's talk about the 1960s growing up in Oklahoma City. What was that like?
It was a great experience. You know, you only know what you know.
Right.
And my parents did a wonderful job of building a protective hedge around me and shielding me from things. I remember the first time I realized that there was segregation was we were at the department store and we waited a long time to be served, and then the person took our order, and then Mama said, "Come on, son, let's go." And I said, "Well, why, Mama? We just left the order." She said, "Well, he took it and threw it away." I said, "Well, how's he going to remember what we want?" So, but you know, it's a I don't say that to lament those days. You learn a lot, and you learn about the power of love. Daddy always made a point of saying you have to focus on the good and magnify it.
Well, you don't seem to have any anger in your voice. I mean, to a certain extent, you had every right to be angry about what happened that day. You're not angry today about it. Why not?
No, it never was. And I remember when I was maybe a teenager, Daddy told me that, you know, the only time I got angry was when Reverend Martin Luther King's mother was killed while she was in church playing the piano. And she was killed by a black man. And that just, learned about that while I was in church. It made me so mad I walked home. Instead of riding home with the family, we'd always go out to dinner to Adair's cafeteria out on Sundays. And so Daddy said, you know, son, anger is like gasoline. It can fuel a car, it can blow up a car. So if you think you're so angry about things, you need to focus that into positive energy. Fill your head with something positive and then share it with others. Focus on the good and magnify it.
There may be more history at Douglas High School than any high school in the state of Oklahoma. Talk about the last years of segregation at Douglas High School and the end of segregation at Douglas High School, which you saw soon after you graduated.
Well, that happened after I was gone. The first
how
integrated school I attended
and your peers view that? Was that something you anxiously looked forward to a day when segregation would end, or at that point had you become so accepted of Douglas and the heritage at Douglas that you didn't necessarily see it as an important step?
Well, we didn't even focus so much on appreciating that it was segregation. We knew what we knew, and our teachers focused on investing themselves in us. The way it was in those days was if a child showed, in the black community, showed promise, then people would invest in them, guide them with a firm hand but with a loving hand. And all of my coaches were tough, but we would accept correction from them because we knew that they cared about us and were preparing us, you know, to be contributing men when we grew up. And so I always think that part of what I owe is to pass on what some of those coaches put in me. I heard Tommy Griffin, Blake Griffin's father, say in an interview recently that he felt he owed a lot to those old coaches who put something in him. One coach who first identified him as a great talent and took a special interest in him. He was 5 years older than me, but I remember my mama taught at Douglas, and I remember growing up, he was a class of 64, I was 69, but I remember he always wore bandages on his head and his Letterman's jacket, and he was swimming. That was the first time I'd seen a black person who was like an elite swimmer, which he was. And so a lot of people, growing up, Douglas to us was, in grade school, Douglas to us was like OU. If we went to an OU game, that was as big as going to Norman. Blocks away, you could see the lights, you know, closer you could hear the drums and the marching band going in. And it was only after I was older that I realized that the Douglas's name, the band's name, the Pride of the East Side, was a takeoff on the name of the Pride of Oklahoma, the OU band. And so we had a lot of esteem in ourselves, and we didn't know that we were lacking anything. You'll hear people talk about growing up poor, but not knowing that they were poor.
Right.
I grew up, you know, segregated, but because of the cocoon that my parents, you know, prepared for me, I didn't know that I was deprived in any way, and all I knew that great things were expected of me, and I just wanted to be a worthy son of a wonderful mother and father.
Well, let me ask about that. I've known you and your mother. Never did get to meet your father, but I've known you and your mother for 35 years. It doesn't seem possible, but it has been. And what kind of an influence was your father and Ruby, your mother, on you growing up and to this very day?
Well, I tell you, Mama, my first memory is of Mama reading to me when I was little. And then later on, in later years, when I started my firm, Mama was my first employee, unpaid. And I can remember she would, when she was concerned because I didn't have clients at the time, she would, you know, I walked past the receptionist desk and she'd say, son, is everything all right? Are you worried? And I had a baby and another one on the way. I said, oh, Mom, everything's fine, relax, everything's cool, which it wasn't. And then I'd go back in my office and I'd hear Mama out at her desk praying aloud for me. And I'd be back in my office praying silently. and it was after that one occasion like that that I said, well, I think I was praying for a sign that I'd done the right thing because I was, worried. And so I saw a Wall Street Journal in the corner. I said, well, I'll tidy up my office. I said, well, I'll just read this one first. And there was an article, a little squib, about how the American Bar Association was was matching law firms with major corporations to show that talent existed within black legal community to service corporate America well. And I wasn't a law firm, I was just a lawyer. But I wrote and got the names of the companies that were participating, and that's when I got my interview with Ford and GM, and things took off from there.
Yeah.
Now, and then I got to say this about Daddy, because what I am is really more of a pale version of who my daddy was. And Daddy put in me two things. One was don't accept any. Daddy didn't want to hear anything about excellent excuses for failure. That goes back to the segregation thing, all of the circumstances. You got to focus on what you can do and work that, and then the rest will take care of itself. And then, because if you're looking to fail, there are 1,000 reasons all the way around you. Daddy would give the example of a man trapped in the bottom of a well. There are 1,000 reasons, good reasons, why he can't get out, but then there's the well rope dangling right before his eyes. So you got to focus on how to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and use the blessings that God has placed within you. And then the other was that...
Well, he was a pastor.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
so
which church?
Avery Chapel. There were 3 churches founded on the day of the run of 1889. Avery Chapel was one of them. And I'm a steward of, a senior steward in the church now.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We're visiting with Robert Alexander. You're watching The Verdict.
Most of the artwork that I produce is with colored pencil and watercolor. The subject matter that I use is, of course, Chickasaw. Most of my themes revolve around family and really that foundation that has been a part of Chickasaw life since ancient times. The Chickasaw Nation is a matriarchal society. You've got one lady, she's probably the oldest member of the family, that everybody goes to and that everybody reveres. That is something that every woman can look forward to in the Chickasaw Nation, because they are extremely important in the family. Maybe one day I will be a matriarch. I think this is probably the secret to the success of our government, is that we still have maintained that idea that family is the most important thing, and that we must minister to the family first, and then all other things will fall into place.
What's your idea of security? A good-paying, sustainable job, a solid economy, less dependence on foreign energy? We can achieve it with the help of one industry, American oil and natural gas. It creates energy, jobs, and a strong economic base we can rely on. New technologies open vast reserves that will supply our energy needs far into the future. Because security, by every definition, is worth protecting.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Camp Myers. We're visiting with Robert Alexander.
Robert, what type of practice do you have? I know, but tell our viewers about it.
We represent, we're privileged to represent Fortune 200 companies, manufacturers, primarily in cases where an entire product line is under attack. So if there's a bad result in the case, potentially an entire product line goes out of existence.
Well,
so we're
clients such as?
Almost all of the pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers of power tools, automobiles, heavy trucks.
And your firm is here in Oklahoma City?
Yes.
And how many lawyers?
Firearms, I should say. One of my clients, a firearm manufacturer, was
Well, I noticed that you had recently established an endowment at the University of Oklahoma School of Law, and you named that endowment after a professor at Harvard. It seems a little bit awkward to do that, but that's the way it played out. Tell us the story behind that.
Well, I established it at OU because that's where the greatest need is. It's to provide opportunities for other promising lawyers of color as me, as someone did before me. I think you have to replenish the well from which you've drunk you feel. And the reason that I named it after, I was also, Andy Coates is one of my mentors, and he's doing great things there in terms of creating opportunities for people. Kent was too modest to say this in terms of saying that we practiced together. Kent hired me, recruited me at OU, my first job back when people weren't providing such opportunities for black lawyers. And then Andy was the hiring partner there at the time. And so I felt like I wanted to, like the mouse coming back to gnaw at the rope that was hindering a great lion, pay back my friends who'd invented me. But Dean Bruce, I have to tell this because this can help other young people, because today they see me, they see the finished product, and they think, oh, well, Harvard, this and that is always easy sailing. When I was in law school, I said earlier that people would invest in me, and so when I left for Harvard in the flesh, a lot of people went to Harvard with me in the spirit, because if I did well, they considered that that was their reward in terms of having put their talents in me, and then I just need to be a worthy recipient of the blessings that they placed in me. And during my first year, I had bleeding ulcers. But when you're 22, you've always been in perfect health, young and strong. If you're sick, you don't know that you're sick. And so I had bleeding ulcers, lost maybe 2 pints of blood, but I didn't know it. I just thought that that was the way fear felt. And so I was taking my final exams, and the pain was so great, and I was so sick from having lost blood the previous night that I walked out of the exam. I didn't think I could finish it because I was just too sick. I was ready, but and so I left, and so the proctor said, oh, well, you have to go and see Dean Bruce, the vice dean of the law school, kind of like the assistant principal in high school. That's who you see if bad news. And Dean Bruce was a veteran of D-Day, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School, physically imposing, academically imposing, very fair, but we had this view of him as being mean. And so I thought that I had a choice between going to my dorm, packing my bags, and going home in disgrace, letting down all those people who had invested in me, their hearts and their hopes in me, or going to see Dean Bruce and being ridiculed, and then going to my dorm and packing my bags and going home in disgrace. And for just by the grace of God, I went to see Dean Bruce anyway. And so I was presenting my case to him, and I said, I'm prepared, but I'm just sick. And he was sitting impassively, I perceived, across his great desk, and I felt like I was sitting on a little 3-legged stool. Mm-hmm. And so at some point during the our conversation, my petition of him for a second chance, the weight of all the hopes that others had on me came down on me, and I began to cry. But I don't mean I just blotted away a tear. I mean I wept. And when 22, you don't show that kind of emotion to anybody. A guy, you try to hide that. And so, and I never will forget. And he came around from behind his desk. I said, "Can't you please give me another chance? I'm prepared, but I'm just sick." He got up, came from around his desk, and he embraced me. He embraced me. He said, "Well, of course you can have another chance. You need to go to the hospital. It's so obvious, that you're not well. We know your record. We know that you're, an excellent student." And so I've never forgotten that he could have said, "Oh, I've seen this before. You're probably one of those affirmative action admittees. You probably didn't belong here in the first place. So you're not prepared, and now you're suffering the consequences." But instead, he embraced me. And years later, when I told him I wanted to name a scholarship after him, and we met at one of the Harvard reunions, at the end of it, our wives and we'd all had a great time fellowshipping together. We were walking away, and he said, softly, even though he had a very powerful voice, he said, "Bob, I ought to tell you this, and I think I can trust you to use this the right way." He said, "In my ancestry, some of my family members were slaveholders. They were among the largest slaveholders in their state." He said, "But I thought you ought to know that." And he knew about my background of some of my family members having been slaves. He said, "I think I can trust you to use that the right way." And as he said that, tears welled up in his eyes and in mine too, because we realized that as different as we would have seemed to observers, that we two men were a fulfillment of Dr. King's dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners would sit down together at the table with brotherhood. I'm one of the great lawyers in the country, but I wouldn't even be a lawyer if it wasn't for Dean Bruce. And then the lesson for young people, though, is this, that you've got to reach out to people. But just as important as that, you've got to give other people the chance to reach out to you. Because Dean Bruce wasn't all those things that I imagined him to be and then imposed on him with my imagination. And so if we get to know each other, then we'll see that we're all brothers and we want to help each other. You know, there was no reason other than because of the goodness that was in Kent, Andy, Bill, Paul, others, to hire me. For the way that we can, we made tremendous strides in terms of diversity in law firms now than the way it was when I came out. I would say the way we can do even more is to see with the eyes that Andy, Kent, Bill, Paul, and if I'm going to tell it all, Judge Thompson, Judge Ralph Thompson, Judge William Holloway saw. I say this, and I'm through with that, is that in the Bible, when the prophet Nathan was told that the next king of Israel would come from the house of Jesse, he went and Jesse brought out his sons, the oldest, all those who had physical regal bearing, who looked like kings as man sees. And Nathan said, this isn't, none of them are before me. He said, surely there must be another. Then he brings out scrawny little boy, you know, David, and say, this is the one. So I think that if we, as experienced lawyers, we know that we can look into a basket of baby lawyers and pick out the tiger cubs from the kittens. But that's as man sees, that's easy. But we can go further than that and expand that view and see, you know, not as man sees, but as God sees through us. We'll find great talent, and you know, nobody would have seen, I didn't look like this 35 years ago. So somebody gave me an opportunity, and now I look this way, and now I'm at this level of success. So only because of that gift that was placed in those other men. And so now, and I can, all those men are still ahead of me. I can't pay them back, so I have to reach back and perpetuate the legacy that they placed in me, Dean Bruce and others.
Bob Alexander, really a fulfilling story. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Flash.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have a final word and a special guest when we get back.
Good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Over time, owning your home has proved to be a good decision. And while lately the economy has presented challenges, it's also helped us focus on what matters most: family, friendship, community, and finding a home that's right for you. No one has more experience and expertise to help you than an agent who is a realtor. We're prepared to show you options, answer your questions, and guide you home. Every market's different. Call a realtor today.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers. Usually it's just the two of us in this segment, but Ben White's joined us out here.
Well, we started to get the professional crew out here. Ben is 14-year-old 8th grader at Westminster School, son of Ben and Robbie White, and has been the associate producer for us on the last 7 shows. So if our shows have been put together well, thanks to Ben. And we're really pleased you could join us and be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Ben, where do you go to school?
I go to Westminster.
And what do you study there? What's your favorite class?
That'd probably be English.
Yeah. What do you want to do with your life?
I want to be a performer or a writer.
You mean like on the stage, in theater or movies?
Yeah, on the theater, maybe movies, or maybe I might write them, or be a journalist or something like that.
Yeah.
Are you getting the chance to perform some now?
Yes, I am. I'm in a play right now, so.
Good.
And what's your role?
I play 5 different parts. It's a.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
You have to memorize 5 different roles.
Yeah, they're all kind of. I don't want to say small. They're all kind of smaller parts. There's a lot of parts in the play. There's only about 15 of us, so we all had to get a host of parts.
Well, it must be difficult though to take on 5 different roles. You have to pretend you're 5 different people.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just have to pretend I'm the mayor, and
Yeah,
I get away with it. I get away with it every day.
Yep.
People believe it every day.
Yeah,
They do.
It's amazing what you can get by with. And you like Oklahoma City?
I do like Oklahoma City.
What's the best thing about Oklahoma City?
I gotta say, maybe the Thunder or OU or something.
Yeah, the Thunder. You're a sports fan?
Yes, I am.
Who's your favorite Thunder player?
Probably Cephalosha.
Cephalosha. So you like the guy that plays defense? That's
do.
impressive, Ben.
That's good.
All right.
Good.
Well, Ben, thanks for coming on, and thanks for your help on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
And thanks for help on the previous 6 shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is when we kiss off the show. So just look out there and say, hey, thanks for watching The Verdict,
Thanks for watching The Verdict.
and we'll see you next week right here with another show.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.